So in what ways do teams at Air St. Gross collaborate and coordinate virtually?
So we have a lot of overlap. We do use VR internally with clients and amid design teams. But what I'm going to be talking about is our sort of model coordination, something that a lot of us already do using Navisworks, but a way that we can more easily coordinate across the project, and some of the tools that we have started using that track those issues as we go. And what we have found is that a lot of these tools that we had started using just because they were quick and efficient also had the benefit of being super helpful when working remotely, and keeping issues in the project in front of people and easily able to be found without necessarily having to be together in a conference room looking at a set of drawings together. So I am going to share my screen. And take you over to this. Is that up for everyone? Or
Sure
at
is.
least for you, Dave? Okay, great. Okay. All right, so we use Navisworks to do our basic clash detection, but we've been using BIM track for the past year as a way to take that clash detection into issue tracking throughout the project. So right off the bat, when you're still working in Revit, built into our template as a sort of time-saving matter, we have Navisworks export views set up in the template. So any project you start using our template has exports for architecture, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and structural. And it isn't reliant on the linked models. It's the content being displayed. So if you have structural things in your architectural model, they will, show up in that export. So you need to make sure, at a work set level, you're controlling that if it's not the correct data. But that way, mechanical, the MEP model might be a single model, but you really want to break it out into the sort of sub parts for these exports. So it's really quick. When you have Navisworks installed, you also have, this was just sort of showing some of the visibility settings for those different views set up. But when you're ready to do a clash detection, you can really quickly go to the export feature, and when you've got Navisworks installed, it has this NWC export option that isn't there if you don't have Navisworks on your computer, though it is possible to install as a separate add-in. So when you have that NWC exporter, you get a pop-up thing of options, and these are the ones that we do. We want to make sure element IDs are coming through. We want all the element properties visible in Navisworks. We want linked files to come through so that we're not having to do these exports in all of the aggregate files. We just want to do it all in our one main file that we've got all of the links coming into. And we want to use the current view because that current view is the templated view with all of the settings we wanted. And we want to cut it up by levels, divide file into levels, so it's easier. Now, the one I'm going to be demonstrating today, because it's the one that was most recently done, that project team had a lot of weird and funky levels that you wouldn't necessarily expect in the building. So we'll see some of the effect of that in a little bit. I can't avoid, but for the most part, we're just talking about like level 1, level 2, level 3 in your project. So when you come into Navisworks, if you don't do all these sort of like template setup, it can take a long time to get started. Unlike Revit, where you can just start a project using a template, Navisworks doesn't have that like new project use template. So what you have to do is that first time you're thinking of how you're going to set this up to save time in the future, you have to set up selection sets that you're not picking object types, you're searching for objects of certain categories. So if new ones come or go, it's still going to find everything that's there. You can save those selection sets as XML files, and then you can use them when you're using your clash detection tests. So right now in this one, it's showing I've got no clash tests, but I can go in and import that XML file of clash detection tests, which utilizes selection sets, and it'll all populate really quickly. And so when you take the time to set these up, save them out on any new project that's ready to do a clash detection process, from the time I start exporting those NWC files out of Revit to the time I have my report in hand of these are all the clashes in the project I want to look at, is maybe 30 minutes versus the like half day or full day it would normally take to set all those parts up from scratch each time.
And essentially, if you were to do that, let's just say that, the first time you don't have any selection sets, those can be saved out, right, Noah? So that
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you can, so that first, if you don't have any of the setup, that first project you're gonna take to do it right, you're gonna save out your selection sets. You're gonna save out
you could do your templates,
clash tests. And also the last one is I'll talk about in a moment, the appearance profiler. So awesome. Right here is the place where you would import the clash tests. And when you import the clash tests, it will also, if you're using selection sets for your clash tests, it'll bring those in all together at once. So these are the clash tests we do at ASG. You might not need to be as extensive, but we just find breaking them into these aggregate pieces can really speed things up and make sure that you're able to talk to the specific engineers about these specific issues really quickly, rather than having to try to keep a meeting with everyone involved when, the ducts to structure only has 2 issues, and most of them are happening in conflicts of mechanical pipes versus ducts or something. Well, that's a weird one for sanitary pipes versus ducts. There we go. All of these, each of these categories would be a selection set. And basically, we are running a selection set of those elements that are fire protection against the selection set of structural framing. And when you import those, you can see on the right, now I've got all those clash tests available to me. And I can also load on the left there, the appearance profiler. So not only am I bringing the tests in and the selection sets, but I can also control how things look in Navisworks, because by default, it's just sort of displaying the materials of the elements in Revit, if you are even exporting those materials. But you probably want to just most pipes all look the same, most ducts look the same, and if I want to know what's supply, what's return, what's exhaust, this is a way I can actually control that visibility in Navisworks. So using those same selection sets and data here, I can load a DAT file that I can save once I've done it the first time onto your network somewhere, so you can easily access it in the future. I can load it and run it, and it basically modifies the visibility, the look and appearance of all the elements in the project to have consistency across multiple clash projects that you're working on. So once you've loaded your file, your clash test, you can just hit the update all button and it will run through every single one of those and tell you what you've got. So, on this one, I had 106 ducts interfering with architecture, 108 structure interfering with architecture, and there's a good chance most of those are just ducts passing vertically up through ceilings and floors that I will be able to ignore. But I want to make sure there isn't, unfortunately, a way to say, hey, is this pipe running vertically through a ceiling, or is it running horizontally coplanar and through the ceiling? That's a problem. So you sort of have to look at all of them. It's just when you're reviewing them, you can go through them really quickly. Now in this view, I can see I clearly have more than just one pipe running into this footing here. So I don't want to have to review though 5, 6, 7 times spread out across, you know, whatever random order the clash detection found them, and keep thinking, didn't I review this already? Didn't I review this already? So the next step is using a tool to group your clashes, so that you can speed up that process. Now, this is the first time. Everything I've said up until this point is just Revit and Navisworks. Okay, so this group clashes tool up on the top left comes as part of BIMtrack. And it's also a plugin you can just purchase separately. If you didn't want to buy BIMtrack, you can buy the group clashes add-in for Navisworks. I think it's like 10 bucks or something. And then you've got this capability. I think I actually had done that, which is why it's on a separate tab instead of as part of the the BIMtrack tab, but that's sort of beside the point. The tool is the same. And when you click on group clashes, you can select all of your tests. Say, I want to group these based on level and grid intersection. You can also do these like by object A versus object B. There's different ways you can choose to group them, but just ease of organization, I like to do this by level and grid intersection. That way it gets everything in a general area in a group together. And let's see, I think a couple of those we had over 100 clashes, and after running the groups, it's down to like 40 and 60 in those two categories. And where there had been 14 specifically in the sanitary and vent pipes versus structure, it's only dropped to 11. So we've only like gotten 3 things to group together because they're spread out pretty far around the building, which is fine. It lets you know that you don't have a ton all in one area. But these 3 are all, sharing a grid intersection in terms of their closest thing. And now that's going to save me a little time. The number of clashes I'll have to go through will be greatly reduced now as I go through. So everything right now, because I just ran these tests, are listed as new. If I were to hit, run the test again, they'd all switch over from new to active. So the new and active category under the status here, whether it says new or active, either of those aren't really helpful to me. So when I do my review, I'm changing the status to either reviewed or approved. If there's a clash that, like I said, is a pipe just running vertically up through a ceiling, that's fine. We know about it, it's fine, not a problem. But if there's something that we want to look at with the team, or you want someone to fix, or at least another person will put eyes on to determine if it's a problem or not, we'd change the status to reviewed. So once you have all of those reviewed clashes, we can go in and open BIMtrack and pull down this issues tab and hit clashes to issues, and it'll take all of your clashes that you want and turn them into BIMtrack issues. So here I'm just checking off, I only right now want to do ducts versus structure and mechanical pipes versus structure, because those are the MEP people and the structural engineers are going to be looking, or the mechanical people and the structural engineers will be looking at these. I'm going to leave off the water pipes, because that might be a different group. And I'm going to set my priority to high. I'm going to say that the disciplines are mechanical and structural. And I'm even going to set like notification to mechanical or structural, because when I added people to the project team in BIMtrack, I gave them categories of which trades they belong to. So just by doing this for an entire test, they'll get notified, hey, a bunch of things have just been added to BIMtrack, go take a look. And they can open up Revit and see these things. So once I've got my settings set up here, notice here I am checking only those reviewed items, because approved ones, they don't need to put those in the list. And new and active, I haven't even looked at. And resolved, of course, I don't. So it's just reviewed are the ones that I want people to look at. I can go ahead and hit publish. And now I've got a list of issues. And this interface here on the right is the same interface if you're using Navisworks, if you're using Revit, even if you're using AutoCAD and you've got your coordinates set up properly. You can even do it with AutoCAD, Calibri. They've got plugins for a bunch, and actually just today I got an email saying they have a plugin. The plugin now works with Enscape. So if you do Enscape visualization, you can you can create issues right there native in Enscape, and we'll get to that in a moment too. So here I am still in Navisworks, and I'm looking at the list, and I'm looking through my high priority items. And I see this one here that like I really want to take a look at. And I can click view and model, and it'll take me right to that location. And if I'm not working in Navisworks, because I did what I needed in Navisworks, I created my glass detection, I created my issues. Now I just want to get to fixing the problems. I'm not going to fix those problems in Navisworks. I'm going to fix them in Revit. So the interface again is the same. I can click view and model. It'll put this red translucent sphere over the place where the issue is. I've created, you can see at the bottom there, a work set dedicated to those spheres. So while I'm reviewing things in Revit, I'm on that work set. So when it generates these clash spheres, it puts them all on that dedicated work set.
The add-in creates the spheres?
Yes, the add-in will create the spheres.
That's interesting that they're actually three-dimensional modeled elements.
Yeah, so it generates them when you do it. And there's ways that if you don't want that happening, everyone on your project can uncheck a setting and it will suppress that feature. But one of the things, what it does by creating that sphere, when you go to view and model, it doesn't actually take you to this view, it takes you to that same perspective view that you saw in Navisworks. But in Revit, there's probably going to be a bunch of stuff in the way that you can't really see the clash well. But when you go click on view and model, and it takes you to that perspective view, and it creates that clash sphere is selected. And so I just click right away the section box, tool, and it takes me right here. And I can see exactly where the clash is. And these NWC models that the clash detection was done when the issue was created was from about a week ago. So now I can see right now that this duct has moved since that issue was first created, but it has not yet been resolved. So I'm not going to go in here and hit edit, resolved, whereas I can come back through here and check a number of these other things. And if the issue no longer exists because the mechanical engineer is going through this exact same list they have on their site, because they have a license that we've been given, that we gave them, and they're on this project, they're seeing the exact same list. So they're taking things off as they resolve them, and they shouldn't even be in there. But if they miss one, it might still be on the list. This is one clearly still needs to be resolved. So there's ways to do this. There's categories like called confidentiality, where you can basically say, hey, I don't need everyone to see all 300 issues on the project. The mechanical engineers are only privy to the things that are given mechanical confidentiality. So their lists might only have 40 things on it. There are filtering abilities so you can narrow down your list to be, let me just look at the critical items. Let me just look at the high priority items. Let me just look at the things related to the ducts and structures. Like you've got the ability to filter your list to hone in on the type of work you're doing. But it's also something like that your project, you don't want to have to overwhelm your different project team members with a lot of stuff that isn't relevant to them. So all those features sort of are built into the software. And what we're finding is, not only does this nearly eliminate the need for having those long coordination meetings, because they get alerted, they have this list, they can go here and see it for themselves. It's highlighted with a big red bubble, and they know exactly what it is they need to do. That a lot of the issues just keep getting resolved. And we can put timelines on and say, I want, some of these things are really simple. I want them resolved in a week. And if there are things that require additional attention, you can edit and add notes and have a conversation that gets tracked through BIM track as well. That sort of conversation about elements, and the communication gets built in through that interface. But we found what was super useful actually extends outside of the model coordination clash detection world, is just, hey, if I want someone to do something in the model, I notice something's wrong, I can just create an issue. So I'm actually going to get out of the PowerPoint here and go into the model. So this is the live model in Revit. And as an example, I'm just going to say, I'm looking here, I'm planning on doing a rendering of this space right here, and I realize nobody's bothered modeling, the return here. I'm going to be looking right into that plenum. I want somebody to fix this. So I can just go select the ceiling, go to my cropped view real quick and say, I want an issue. So I'm creating an issue. It has a little, thumbnail here. I want this to be like perfectly clear. So I'm going to even hit this edit. It's going to take me into like a old school MS Paint sort of thing. And I'm just going to circle in red with a thick line and say, hey, right here, I want them to close this. So I'm going to close, hit save, and the thumbnail, I don't know if you can see, it's pretty pixelated, but it has updated with that outline now. And I can say, close off plenum. And I'm going to, let's just assign this to me so I don't bother anyone else on this project team. This is super important. This person's going to get an email as soon as I hit publish. Anyone outside of the architectural group isn't even going to see that this issue is a problem. They won't even be able to find it. It's a request. It's open. I'm hitting publish.
I would imagine that not only for you and your team internally, this would be an amazing, issue tracking tool or kind of a task list, if you will. But this is also really something amazing that to take to a meeting. If you're working with, as the architect, I'm working with the plumbing engineer, I can bring my specific list of issues, right?
Yeah, so any team member can check, like, if they've been assigned something, so if you do have coordination meetings and you're going over some of these lists, you might be not resolving it right there, but you're getting a sense of who's going to be taking on the solution. You can just start assigning those there. And so people can go and filter their list and see what's assigned to them, hit apply, and now we're only looking at this. So right now, the only thing on this list is I need to close off this plenum. And again, it's not going to matter if I'm in Revit or in Navisworks or in Enscape. This same thing can happen. So if you're, doing a tour of the model ahead of a client presentation and you're seeing issue after issue, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, you're now, with the new plugin that they announced today, able to do just that. You can just create those issues right there in the model, and it'll take you there as you had viewed, in that same perspective view. So let's say if I close this again and go here and I say view in model, it will take me to the exact view that I'd been in before.
So with that, Jay Klein actually has a question. Do you still follow the traditional NWF to NWC workflow for Navis to allow engineers to view issues in the faster NWC model, or does this kind of nullify that process? BIM track is now the source of these issues.
Yeah, we have eliminated that. We don't push out separate NWC models. We create the NWC models up front as far as just to keep things lighter in Navisworks. Technically, we don't even have to do that. Like because everything's through selection sets and not based on the models, like we could just export all one giant Revit model with all the links. I still do it because it's a lot easier when clicking on things to have that sort of aggregation of the different trades in the Navisworks space. But since we are taking care of all of the issues live just in Revit and no longer really working in Navisworks and trying to find, you find an issue in Navisworks, you usually then have to like rotate the models, zoom out to figure out where this is relative to the building, just to then find that same place in Revit. Or you're generating a list, copying an element ID, pasting it in search by element ID in Revit, finding it. And like there are ways to get to that element, but it's like multi-step versus just click, take me there.
It looks like Rebecca Fisher, I'm not sure which company she's coming from, but she's an MEP, and her coworkers have worked with Ayer St. Gross and utilized BIMTrack and said that it's a much faster workflow than the traditional Navisworks workflow, because you can fix the issue right then and there. Like you're saying, it's interoperable between all these programs. So thank you for your comment, Rebecca. Definitely backing up what she's with
Not lying.
Associates. Yeah. So, and very pointed to that question. So thank you for your feedback on that. Looks like we have Timothy Conroy with a few questions. So we're going to bring Timothy on to have a conversation with you, if that's okay, sure. Noah. He has a few in here, and so definitely want to allow him to ask his questions.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Sure can. Hey, Tim.
Hey, so one thing that I know we've been struggling with over the last few months is the delineation between issue management and clash management. And we feel like in the past few years, we were always on the clash management, going through clash batches, creating clash groups, then creating the PDF or HTML reports. Mm-hmm. We've found that moving away from that, and kind of, the industry as a whole has come so far on that topic that as the GC, we no longer need to manage clashes. And so instead, we're focusing a lot more on managing issues. And so if the clash can be resolved by the trade partners, we don't need to discuss it. And so I guess my question is to you and to maybe the group over the chat is, does everyone agree, or does anyone feel that we shouldn't be creating the distinction between clashes and issues? Or do we think that it's best to say that we are issue managers, not clash managers?
So are you asking this from the position of a general contractor?
I would say either way. I mean, I am a general contractor, so I guess that's where I'm coming from. But
so I guess where I am coming from is, as architect, as project team, before we turn in a set of drawings for bid, if this is a traditional setup, this is all happening before that 100% CDs go out. Mm-hmm. We're starting this process like at maybe 75% DDs and making sure, and just doing a run, and then maybe two more times some big pushes during the construction document moments until we see that there isn't anything there. But as I was trying, like the once you have all the sort of built-in stuff there, the process of updating and checking to make sure you haven't created any new problems is pretty fast. But it's all intended to be like making, covering our butts before we put the drawings out. Whereas I feel like a lot of the times the clash detection we're getting from the construction manager or general contractor is the last check before you put the bids in, to make sure there isn't something that nobody has looked at that's going to be an issue. And I think that if we are doing our job, this is just a way that we can do our jobs better. But this isn't looking at the time, the order that things are getting installed. Like, that, I
Right.
guess
Yeah, we have to worry
those
about
are the
sequence.
issues. The sequencing, can be the next thing that you guys are looking at, and knowing that the actual elements aren't trying to coexist.
Yeah.
I think when during that initial review step, like I'm literally just hitting the down button in Navisworks and like, is this a problem or not? Is this a problem or not?
Yeah.
And mass ignoring tons of things. They're like, this just isn't a problem. We're not even looking at things generally like that's less than 2 inches in diameter, because it can go somewhere. Like we can make it work. So we're trying to just look at the things that are going to potentially be harder. And if
Yeah.
the team agrees, like, yeah, I modeled it here, there's plenty to be said for like what gets modeled and how it gets modeled, so that it becomes clear on the drawings versus how it's going to be installed. We all know that like pipes get modeled a lot further apart from each other than they need to get installed, so that they can be legible in the drawing sets. So if we come up with if those sorts of clashes show up and we see there's plenty of space right next to this, like, that's fine. We just hit accept and move on. Like, this is really just to focus on those issues that really are issues.
Yeah, hopefully as technology progresses and we move away from the paper copy, it kind of pains me to hear you say we're spacing pipes out because we're making it legible, when you've got infinite zoom on a PDF potentially. And so if we can move away from the kind of the old way of doing things, right now we're kind of handcuffing ourselves at times because we're making it look right for print. And if we don't need to print, then we don't need to bend over backwards to make it look right for print. The fact that we still have some 2D line work, where like the details are drawn in 2D, that's where we get into sticky situations, because we leave the 3D world and we go into 2D to make things look right. And that's when things don't quite come together as they're supposed to, because we're limiting ourselves. So
well, it looks like, guys, we have a minute left. I definitely want to honor everybody's time. Looks like we have a topic for next month on issues versus clashes, because it looks like there's a lot to be said about those, a lot of comments. Jacob, do you want to take a second or two to give your input or your feedback on the question that was provided before?
Yeah, actually, just real quick with the issues versus the clashes, I say, Tim, you're right with trying to get the trades to do more on their end to resolve them. We actually set up a hierarchy now where we basically say these types of clashes, if it's electrical versus, plumbing, it's automatically associated to the electrical team, and they have to go through and find it. So we actually have a matrix that we basically run clash, figure out what the type of clash is, and then it's assigned automatically. We're not one by one assigning them. That way they're discussing more, and then we're coming back and discussing ones that really need it. And then BIM track also allows you to define different types, so you can actually customize your types to design issue, construction issue, owner issue, and be able to select those when you go in and do it.
Thanks, Jacob. Once again, looks like a lot of people have a lot of things to say about this portion of coordination, right? Issues, clashes, what happens during the design phase, what doesn't happen.